Hi there, I'm the Mythkeeper. Welcome to the best place on the internet for Pathfinder lore and history. This week we're taking a second look at Iblydos, a region that I already covered once before, so you can think of this as a companion piece to that original video. And where possible, I'll try not to cover too much of the same ground. There are a few things that have prompted me to make a second Iblydos video, though. The first and most obvious thing is that since the publishing of that original video, Paizo announced and then subsequently released the Mythspeaker adventure path, which provides a lot of additional details not just about Iblydos, but about the entire Kardaji Bay region. Secondly, even at time of publication, there were a few resources about Iblydos which included some details concerning some additional hero gods that I didn't catch the first time around. So this video is meant to plug some holes, fill in some details, and basically cover more information so you can make characters from the region more easily, or run your own Mythspeaker or related adventures with greater ease as well. Let's start this video then by looking at the broader Kardaji Bay region. The history of Kardaji Bay. Iblydos is located in Kardaji Bay, which is the heart of a wealthy coastal region largely occupied today by the Padishah Empire of Kelesh. Though imperial rule has maintained peace here, long-standing rivalries and recent upheavals have created a growing uncertainty about the future. Emerging gods inspire unrest, while internal struggles within the Padishah Empire's leadership have weakened its authority. But to better understand the current state of affairs in Kardaji Bay, we first have to take a closer look at the history of its people. The history of this region dates back tens of thousands of years, to the long millennia before the Earthfall Cataclysm, and to empires that have been lost to before the time of recorded history. At this point, I have in my channel talked a lot about the various empires that emerged on Golarion before the Cataclysm, so let's draw on that wealth of information to take a snapshot of what the world might have looked like way back in the Age of Serpents. The emerging power centers in this ancient time included most famously the Empire of Taumata in Tianxia, the Empire of Aslant, located in a now shattered island continent that lay between Avestan and Arcadia, the vast region controlled by the Khelids of central Avestan, the scattered elven-controlled holdings of Avestan and Garand, the vast Empire of Serpentfolk, which also spanned both Avestan and Garand, the Cyclops Empire of the Golgan on the western coast of Garand, and the Haloma kingdoms of eastern Garand, which would eventually become the United Realm of Holomog. Humans at this time could already be found across the globe, but except in these prominent pockets of civilization, most human cultures formed simple, nomadic, or hunter-gatherer communities. Because history from this period is so fragmented, we don't have exact dates for when each of these cultures properly formed, what are all the conflicts that shaped them, nor exactly how they viewed each other, if they were aware of each other at all. We do, however, have some understanding of the rough sequencing of major events, including the war between Aslant and the Serpentfolk Empire, the fall of the Golgan Empire, the founding of Thassalon, the emergence of the later Coloran Empire, and so on and so forth. Likewise, in Kardaji Bay and the Iron Coast, historians have pieced together some of the major events in the human settlement of this region in the pre-Earthfall period. It is generally accepted that the first human settlements along the bay were established by explorers of the ancient empire of Khattib, who pressed north and west from the dense jungles that cloaked the southern reaches of the region. These Khattibi pioneers founded a chain of coastal enclaves that would, in time, coalesce into a vital artery of commerce. This route exists even to this day, as the renowned Golden Road, enduring across millennia as one of the great conduits between east and west. Although the Khattibi people were the first to claim stretches of the coast, their fledgling kingdoms would be quickly eclipsed by a more northern Khazman power. At some time, during the Age of Serpents, the Empire of Ninshabur emerged in central Khazmarin. There is a lot we don't know about Ninshabur, but we have some details we can pull from a variety of sources. The first edition Planar Adventures Handbook suggests it was named for another realm called High Ninshabur, located in Elysium, while the first edition Campaign Setting Guide tells us Ninshabur was the first and greatest of the so-called Origin Lands, lining the southwest coasts of the Castrovan Sea and its river systems, suggesting its original capitals might be located here in the official Golarion world map, which features a confluence of rivers feeding into the Castrovan in the southwest. Another important and early Ninshaburian city was Ezidan, described as a fortified port city built around a towering ziggurat. This again is not labeled on any map, but which various sources name as being located somewhere on the southern coast of the Castrovan Sea, so my placement here is an assumption. Finally, we know that a third power center and an important holy site was the city of Gormuz, whose exact location is also not indicated in any map in the source material. But according to the Legacy of Fire adventure path's write-up on the spawns of Rovagug, is said to be located somewhere in the barren lands called the Windswept Wastes, lands which no polity truly governs in this day. Gormuz may be the most noteworthy of all the major Ninshiburian settlements, and to understand its significance as a holy site, and later a place of grave danger and horror, we have to go a little further back in our history. Before even the Age of Serpents, way back in the Age of Creation, as described in various other videos, the gods set aside their rivalries to confront Rovagug, whose destructive nature threatened the stability of the multiverse. The conflict culminated on Galarian, where Sarenrae struck the planet's surface, creating a rift that reached to its core. The assembled gods cast Rovagug into this chasm, imprisoning him within an extra-dimensional space that became known as the Dead Vault. Following the imprisonment, Sarenrae restored the surface of Galarian, though not completely. The site of the rift remained visible as a vast, smooth scar, marking the location of Rovagug's confinement beneath the world. A quick side note here, it is worth noting that in earlier first edition sources, Ninshibur was a more recent empire, established in the Age of Darkness, but it's been pushed back in time in second edition to the Age of Serpents. Throughout this video, I try to better align with the second edition sources wherever there is conflicting information. Back to our history. In this period in the Age of Serpents, Ninshibur would emerge as one of the largest human empires anywhere in the world, rivaling in scale and size the kingdoms of Holomog and Garand, and even distant Taumata, Aslant, and later Thassalon. What began as a formidable northern kingdom grew into a vast empire, stretching from the distant lands of Ayubaria to the shores of Kardaji Bay. Ninshibur's expansion brought the systematic conquest and absorption of the Khattibi coastal settlements, reducing Khattib's influence to its southern heartlands. Along these glittering coastal waters, the Ninshiburi conquerors raised cities of remarkable scale and splendor, rivaling even those of their imperial core. Yet it was not only along the coast that Ninshibur left its mark. Upon a high and rugged plateau, the empire established the colony of Hukaris, built to exploit rich deposits of copper and tin. From these mines flowed the metals that would sustain Ninshibur's power, and in time heralded a technological transformation of their empire, for it was here that the secret of smelting steel first took root, giving rise to the name the Iron Coast, for the land stretching between Hukaris and the sea. The earliest Ninshiburian settlers who came to Kardaji Bay also brought to the region their religious traditions. Their pantheon was vast, composed largely of deities whose origins stretched back to the Age of Creation and the primordial struggle that culminated in the binding of Rovagug. As noted earlier, this was a location of religious significance to the people of Ninshibur. Obviously, a key figure among them was Sarenrae herself, whose direct interventions on behalf of her worshippers were said to be both frequent and transformative in this time. But they also worshipped all the gods that involved themselves in that struggle, venerating such deities as Abadar, whom they locally called Abdur, Calistria, who was known locally as Kelis, as well as Desna and Pharasma. However, among these deities, none held greater sway in the Iron Coast than Gorm, the so-called Lord in Iron. Worship of these gods, apart obviously from Gorm, endures to this day, a living reminder of Ninshibur's legacy in this region. This region also saw worship of other gods that are less well known in the inner sea cultures we are more familiar with, but most of these have been lost to time. One Ninshiburian god to endure to this day is the hero god Namzarim, also known as the Sword of Ninshibur, who is still worshipped today in the city of Ezida I discussed earlier. Today's prophet of Namzurim claims he rests in the halls of slumbering kings, but will return someday to lead his faithful to victory and create a new empire. In any case, eventually the Age of Serpents gave way to the Age of Legend. As we know, this age was heralded by the Empire of Aslant's defeat of the Serpentfolk Empire. The Age of Legend saw the expansion of elven influence in Galarian, the slow collapse of the Golgan Empire, and of course the rise of Thassalon in Avestan. In Casmaran, the Age of Legend brought further upheaval as well. Chief among these was the rise of the Ashmayar Empire, which was established by an emergent seafaring people hailing from the islands of Iblydos. These precursors to the modern Iblydosi people, the Ashmayar began sacking the temple cities and ziggurats of the Empire of Ninshibur, and raising their own palace cities atop them. Although Ninshibur was vast and in parts very wealthy, their scale had outstripped their logistical ability to support their own empire. This, combined with other internal strife that was emerging between their provinces, meant that large portions of their southern empire fell to the Ashmayar invaders. Over the next few centuries, this new civilization would claim the regions known today as Midea, Mishyria, and even Khadira, firmly establishing themselves as a key regional power of the ancient world. Additionally, the fall of the western coastal cities isolated Hukaris and the Iron Coast from the rest of Ninshabur, effectively transforming the Iron Coast into an independent Ninshaburi polity. What followed was an age marked by near-constant conflict, as Ashmayar city-states, Khattibi remnants, and the powers of the Iron Coast struggled for supremacy. From this crucible of war emerged a rich tapestry of legend, heroes, demigods, and conquerors whose deeds remain embedded in the cultural memory of the region. Towards the end of the Age of Legend, the Golgan Empire completely collapsed in western Garand, as a result of corruption at the hands of dark gods. In this period, large numbers of Cyclopes journeyed east across Garand, eventually sailing across the Obari Ocean and settling in large numbers in Kardaji Bay. Although initially met with hostility by the local humans, the Cyclopes eventually formed an alliance with them, at least in the islands of Iblydos. More details on the ancient Cyclops Empire can be found in my original Iblydos video, as well as in my videos on Iobaria and northeastern Avestan, and my videos on the western Wangi Expanse. Finally, the Age of Legend was brought to an abrupt and catastrophic end by the Earthfall Cataclysm. The Great Calamity shattered civilizations across Khazmaran, reducing even the mightiest empires to ruin, including much of what was left of the now fragmented Empire of Ninshabur. Yet, as described in my first Iblydos video, the people of Iblydos, forewarned by their Cyclopean allies gifted with visions of the future, endured this disaster better than most. In the aftermath, they established a second wave of colonies along the northern coasts, preserving fragments of their former glory. Elsewhere, the realms of Khattib, Hukaris, and the Iron Coast survived in diminished forms, their populations clinging to survival amid the long night of the Age of Darkness. While many civilizations struggled in the Age of Darkness, one particular group overcame many hardships together, learning to master both the darkened world and the harsh deserts of the central Khazmaran. Having fled from the great grass sea of Karaz in -4983, the Althameri people entered the lands of the southern Khazmaran. Towards the end of the Age of Darkness, they had reached and settled the deserts of modern-day Ayarad, establishing their kingdom there by -4583. The Age of Darkness gave way to the Age of Anguish in -4294 as the sun crept back into the world. Meanwhile, back in the ruins of Ninshabur, the city of Gormuz had been rebuilt. Sarenrae herself was tricked into smiting the city, which in turn did irreparable damage to the seal that kept Rovagug contained. By the year -3923, a new horror emerged from the ruins of Ninshabur. A terrible sinkhole formed where the scar had once been, collapsing the ruins of the city into a deep and ruinous pit. This new location, now called the Pit of Gormuz, belched forth Ulunat, the first of the so-called spawns of Rovagug, titanic behemoths and monstrosities that periodically emerged from this pit to wreak havoc upon the land. Ulunat would travel all the way to Osirian, where its corpse is now part of the skyline of the Osirian capital of Sothis. Ulunat's emergence preceded a number of earthquakes, which combined with its own terrible rampage of destruction heralded a devastation that sent waves of refugees fleeing towards the relative safety of Kardaji Bay. This sudden influx of people from the north strained the fragile societies that had only just begun to recover, unraveling their tenuous stability and leaving them vulnerable to conquest. And into this fractured landscape finally came the Althameri warlords of the central deserts, from their capital near Ayarad. From these conquests emerged the foundation of the Padishah Empire of Kalesh, and more details on these conquests are covered in my Khadira region deep dive. However, to share some key dates here, by -3822, General Bithra al-Hezbat began a conquest of both the Khattibi and Ashmayar holdings in the region, and finally by -614, the Padishah Empire subdued the remaining Ashmayar cities and asserted dominion over the entire region, establishing the satrapies of Mishyria, Midea, Thieron, Hukaris, Khattib, and the dozen holdings of the Unbroken League. Finally, at the very end of the Age of Destiny, in -43, Padishah Emperor Adelan IV also incorporated the satrapy of Khadira on the far end of Khazmaran. Throughout the Ages of Destiny and Enthronement, the Padishah Empire maintained its hold over these lands, binding them into a far-reaching imperial structure. Yet despite their vast size and influence, and several attempts to conquer the islands of Iblydos, the Iblydosi have managed to retain their independence. The most legendary of these battles occurred at some unspecified date early in the Age of Enthronement, when the Padishah Empire assembled a vast armada to subdue the islands and fold them into their vast territory. This threat caused all 9 of the Iblydian city-states to unite under General Ilianti, whose leadership and tactical acumen led the Iblydans to victory over the Kelishite armada in the famous Battle of Shattered Reefs. And perhaps because of Iblydos' example, in the nearly 5,000 years of Kelishite rule, the memory of former independence, and of their once great empires, never fully faded among the people of Kardaji Bay, all of which sets the context for today. In recent years, the upheavals of the War of Immortals have shaken the foundations of Padishah power, reigniting long-suppressed ambitions and resentments. As divine forces once more stir in the region, many now look to the past not merely as history but as prologue. For in Kardaji Bay and along the Iron Coast, the echoes of ancient empires have begun to sound once again, and the possibility of their rebirth now feels as though it is looming on the horizon. The Kardaji Bay Gazetteer. Let's now take a look at each of the Kelishite holdings in the region, examining their unique history and culture, and look at current events. We'll start in the northwest, closest to Qadira, and work our way east and south as we go, before finally coming back to Iblydos for an updated gazetteer there as well. Mishyria. Mishyria occupies a central place in the historical development of the northern Kardaji coast, having served as the primary heartland of the Ashmayar conquests in antiquity. They represent the very first lands the Ashmayar acquired from the ancient empire of Ninshabur. Unlike its regional counterparts Qadira to the west and Midea to the east, whose prosperity was traditionally derived from maritime trade and access to foreign markets, Mishyria's prominence emerged principally from its skilled warriors and sophisticated military apparatus. That military history goes all the way back to pre-Earthfall periods, but it continues even to the modern day. From the earliest phases of Ashmayar dominance through the subsequent period of Iblydan colonial influence, whenever Mishyria formed a part of a broader political grouping, Mishyrian populations constituted the core of regional armed forces. This is true even today, as recruits from Mishyria continue to form a substantial proportion of the Padishah Empire's most elite military units. The distinctive boar-tusked helms worn by these forces have become an enduring symbol of their regional identity. Their long-standing martial tradition has fostered a highly regimented culture, while also cultivating a populace marked by intensity in both labor and leisure. Mishyrians are also known for their equestrian skills, their proficient marksmanship with distinctive short bows, and for their elaborately sculpted golden jewelry, usually featuring griffins or other winged creatures. In addition to its military contributions, Mishyria has historically played a critical role in sustaining the broader imperial economy as well. The irrigated coastal plains of Anvar, long regarded as one of the most productive agricultural zones in the region, supplied significant quantities of staple and luxury crops, particularly dates and pomegranates. These goods achieved a reputation for exceptional quality, supporting long-distance trade networks extending east towards Vudra and westwards as far as Rahadum and Cheliax. Despite a proud military history dating back millennia, the region has actually had a pretty tumultuous history under Padishah rule. Its troubles began in earnest in the 3rd millennium of the Age of Enthronement, when a spawn of Rovagug called Urarkun came across the Miraz Desert and rampaged through Mishyria. Kelishite forces were slow to respond, and even when reinforcements arrived, they were unable to effectively retaliate against this threat, proving helpless in preventing the enormous winged beast from devouring Mishyrians by the thousands, even as it laid waste to many of their lands and great works and important cities. Subsequently, Mishyria experienced a sustained period of decline, which was further exacerbated by recurrent natural disasters and economic instability. This in turn precipitated a prolonged period of political fragmentation, during which established military hierarchies deteriorated into organized banditry. These groups, while retaining elements of prior discipline, disrupted regional communications and trade. Incidentally, unrest and volatility in Mishyria is one of the reasons that Qadira in the Inner Sea region operates more like an independent country than it does like a satrapy of the Padishah Empire. It is simply too isolated to be subjected to direct imperial control. Another consequence of this unrest began about 300 years ago, when a cult of Moloch, an archdevil associated with fire and war, grew to prominence in the state. A surprisingly significant portion of the Mishyrian population joined this growing religion, giving rise to the people known as the Beshzen, or the people of the Pact. The Beshzen established a centralized regime characterized by reconstruction of urban infrastructure, but at the cost of imposing a highly controlled and coercive social order, a situation not unlike that which we see in Cheliax and their worship of Asmodeus in the west. The Beshzen have ruled vast areas of Mishyria for 300 years now, and while they have been effective in restoring a measure of stability to some parts of the country, they are viewed with fear and hatred in equal parts by independent parts of the country. More recently, in the last 50 years, oppositional elements within Mishyria, supported by broader Kelishite interests, sought external intervention to the problem of the Beshzen. This would ultimately culminate in the direct involvement of the imperial lord Felena, whose campaign, spearheaded by her own growing cult in the state, ultimately resulted in the overthrow of the Beshzen from most of Mishyria, though they have retained control of the region's northern highlands. Finally, in early 4724, the God's Reign occurred. The war god Gorum was killed, and his blood and armor showered across Golarion, which has in turn triggered various significant upheavals. One of these occurred in Mishyria, and that was the resurrection of the hero goddess Itaris. Once a mortal hero of the Ashmayar people, Itaris was said to have descended into the underworld, where she deceived Idursius, patron god of the serpent folk, and stole from him secrets of both magic and agriculture. With these gifts, she led her people into an age of power and prosperity. According to legend, she was the one who helped usher in the age of the Ashmayar ascendancy during the Age of Serpents. As a result of her seduction of Idursius, she is also often called the Bride of Idursius, or the Bride of Serpents. Now it appears she has returned. Reborn and radiant with ancient authority, Itaris has gathered a fervent following among Mishyria's displaced and desperate. She speaks of a forgotten age, of a time when their ancestors were not subjects of a distant empire, but masters in their own right. Through strange salves and rituals long lost to the world, administered by her serpentine servants, her cult offers aid to the flood-stricken, the war-torn, and the abandoned. Even more surprising, the imperial cult of Felena has aligned itself with her. In a spectacle witnessed by thousands, the imperial lord herself knelt before Itaris, acknowledging the reborn goddess in a ceremony that has only deepened the growing fervor. Not all welcome her return, though. The temples of Sarenrae, long stewards of the region, now find themselves treated as interlopers in lands they have served for millennia. Tensions simmer, threatening to ignite into open conflict. And meanwhile, as a growing rift forms between the temples of Sarenrae and the cults of Felena and Itaris, the cult of Moloch is consolidating its power in the north. It seems certain that more conflict is coming to this region. There are a few important cities and locations in Mishyria worth calling out. Its capital city is called Tirchin, located south near the border with Midea. This is where the Padishah Empire of Kilesh is able to exert its greatest control. There is a large northern city called Lugad, closer to the power centers of the Beshzen people and the cult of Moloch. There is also a major port along the Kezeret River, called Manipur, which was recently partly flooded. Further up the Kezeret River is the cause of that flooding. Named for the expansionist emperor who commissioned it, the Dazij Dam stood for nearly 6 millennia as a symbol of imperial dominance and ingenuity. It served to bend the course of the river and transform the plains of Anvar into a fertile expanse famed for its olives and pomegranates. The dam endured 59 centuries, but it fell in 7 days. Under the relentless assault of the God's Reign, the reservoir swelled beyond all limits. Ancient stonework, thought unassailable, fractured and failed. The dam burst, unleashing a catastrophic flood that tore across the plains, sweeping away towns, industries, and entire coastal settlements into the sea. Yet when the waters receded, the drained basin north of the shattered dam exposed something older still, the remains of a once glorious temple city. Waterlogged, yet eerily preserved, its sprawling structures belong to the ancient pre-Earthfall Ashmayar civilization. This is the site where Itaris, the reborn goddess, emerged. Midea. Midea is currently the more powerful and more economically stable of the two Ashmayar successor states along the northern coast of Kardaji Bay. In the long twilight following the collapse of Great Ninshabur, it rose from provincial prominence into a fledgling empire, contending fiercely with Khattib for dominance of the Iron Coast during the waning centuries of the Age of Legend. That independence ended 5,000 years ago at the height of the Age of Destiny, when Midea finally fell to the powers of the Padishah Empire. The people of Midea reflect the layered history of the region. Midean humans have dark hair and ruddy complexions, bearing the blended heritage of Ninshaburian, Ashmire, and Kelishite ancestry. They are famed for their refinement and appetite for luxury, particularly their taste for exotic sea creatures, which are dredged from the depths of Kardaji Bay, delicacies prized for their rare and unique flavors. In addition to its predominant human culture, Midea has other heritages as well. Fauns flourish in the wild uplands, near the mountains that separate Midea from Kalesh's desert heartland, while minotaurs dwell in the foothills below. Once the minotaurs held a place of honor in Midean society. Many of the region's grandest monuments and enduring works of stone were shaped by their hands. That legacy fractured during the early Age of Enthronement, when the Minotaur warlord Varadni Voon led a devastating incursion here, commanding an army of centaurs that razed 3 major cities. Voon's defeat at the hands of Aradin on the Isle of Kortos in 23 AR marked the end of the uprising, but not the tensions between the human and Minotaur populations. Later, many of Midea's more assimilated Minotaurs would eventually depart for the safer province of Thieron to the south, where the same historic tensions did not exist. Many of those who remained withdrew from public life, retreating into secluded mountain enclaves. Even now, nearly 5 millennia later, suspicion lingers, and many Mideans still lay the ancient devastation at their feet. Regardless of these internal tensions, today Midea has become one of the Empire's wealthiest satrapies, a nexus of maritime trade whose glittering port cities rival any further north along the Castrovan Sea. Its prosperity is underwritten by one of the oldest and most powerful banking institutions in Galarian, a financial engine as influential as any army. Important cities in Midea include Sasho, located in the far northeast of the province, closest to the heartland of the Padishah Empire, and high in a rugged and mountainous region, and Valyria, another significant city located upriver from the Midean capital city of Kalios. Kalios is the seat of Midea's current governor, Lady Chalice, who once stood quite close to Padishah imperial politics as a confidant and friend of Layla al-Parishat, the empress's niece. She was widely regarded as the most stable candidate to succeed the ailing and impossibly ancient Emperor Kalish XXII. But unfortunately that influence has since unraveled. Layla vanished during a military campaign in the Grass Sea, in the chaotic aftermath of the God's Reign event. In her absence, power has shifted. The Khadiran Prince Yarl now seems the likely successor, and his growing influence has left Chalice increasingly isolated at court. Though relations with neighboring Thieron have never been stronger, on their other border the instability spreading from Mishyria has Governor Chalice increasingly worried. Chalice is not alone in her concerns. Across Midea there is a growing fear that the forces reshaping the west may soon reach their shores, and that the province's long prosperity may prove as fragile as the empires that came before it. Thieron. Though the northern reaches of the old Iron Coast served as a frequent battleground between Midea and Khattib, its deeper cultural ties actually lie with the old empire of Ninshabur and the kingdom of Hukaris. And over the last 5,000 years, since its conquest by the Padishah Empire, as well as its proximity to Iblydos, have produced a society marked by striking diversity, where traditions, faiths, and identities have blended into a uniquely syncretic whole. Perhaps most uniquely in terms of Thieron's cultural diversity is its significant Minotaur population, whose prominence in the province is at least partly rooted in tragedy. In the wake of Padishah conquest of Midea, many Minotaurs faced harsh persecution. Their religious practices were suppressed in a campaign of violence and cultural erasure. These abuses were partly what paved the way for the warlord Varadni Voon to come to power among the Minotaurs of Midea, whose rebellion in the early Age of Enthronement saw entire cities laid to waste. In the aftermath of his defeat, Thieron was established along the northern Iron Coast as a refuge for Minotaurs who had remained loyal to the Empire. There they rebuilt, not just their communities, but also their faith. Here the Minotaurs of Thieron have given rise to a specific Minotaur religion, centered on the worship of the sacred brother bulls, Belek and Cormian, whose horns are said to be eternally locked in a contest for supremacy. Their duality, as well as their conflict without resolution, has come to define much of the Thieron Minotaur cultural identity. Across Thieron, the legacy of its Minotaur builders endures in stone. Monumental works, both ancient and newly carved, dot the landscape, drawing pilgrims and travelers from across Kazmarin. Most revered are the sunken temples of the Brother Bulls, vast sanctuaries hewn directly from bedrock and connected to labyrinthine tunnel networks steeped in religious significance. In the present day, the Padishah Empire maintains its authority less through force here than through wealth and careful political maneuvering. Most Thierons, Minotaur or otherwise, accept imperial rule as a fact of life, and many take pride in their place within the greater empire. Yet this attitude is not completely ubiquitous, particularly among Thieron's Nephilim and other gifted peoples, who have been more brazen or outspoken on the issue of independence from the empire, many of whom have now been quietly taken into imperial custody. This policy has stirred resentment, rekindling old fears beneath the surface of compliance. Part of the reason for the recent drastic action is once again the God's reign, both because it has empowered Prince Yarl, who has a harsher view on seditious language, and because individuals touched by divine power during the God's reign might prove a greater threat to the empire than ever before. Yarl's policies in the province have naturally had the reverse effect, not increasing stability and loyalty, but instead stirring resentment and rekindling old fears. At the same time, rumors have begun to spread that Varadni Voon has been reborn somewhere in Avestan. Whether true or invention, the story has ignited a dangerous spark. Among some, it inspires visions of renewed strength and independence. In the imperial court, it is regarded with mounting alarm. Many ancient Minotaur temples, presumed abandoned by the Padishah Empire, have become secret redoubts, hidden strongholds from which Minotaurs may wage a careful resistance. Foremost among Thieron's wonders is the cliffside complex of Tokanos. Here dwells Elegia, an immortal Medusa oracle whose prophecies draw a steady procession of supplicants, nobles, merchants, priests, and power brokers alike. Her words carry undeniable weight, shaping decisions far beyond the temple's windswept ledges. Some come seeking the truth, others come seeking advantage, but it is also said that those who attempt to sway her through flattery or bribery leave a more permanent offering. The halls of Tokanos are lined with statues, silent, lifelike reminders of those who believed prophecy could be bought and discovered too late the cost of such presumption. The capital city of Thieron is Nessia, a bustling port city located on Kardaji Bay, facing the islands of Iblydos, and somewhere further inland is another important city, Cheld, located close to the border with Hukaris. Hukaris. The history of Hukaris begins in the early age of legend, when the empire of Ninshubur conquered the region from the indigenous Kala people of the mountains. They established the region as a mining colony, drawn by its rich veins of natural ore. It was here that anvil priests of Gorum first unlocked the secret of smelting iron, a discovery that transformed Ninshubur's armies and reshaped the balance of power across Kazmarin. The mountains themselves were considered sacred by the Kala people, said to be the dwelling place of the storm god Umarik and his consort Anras, and their divine kin. Even today their worship persists, a quiet but unbroken reminder that neither Ninshubur nor Khattib nor the Padishah Empire has ever fully claimed Hukaris in spirit. Even as Ninshubur receded, following the Ashmayr conquests in the west, the legacy of metalwork and innovation remained in the people of Hukaris. Hardened by mountain life and armed with superior metallurgy, they surged westwards, conquering the coast and forging a modest empire of their own. In time, their holdings became known as the Iron Coast, a name that spoke both to its exports and its identity. Hukarian metals flowed across the sea to distant markets, from Osirian to Vudra, enriching the realm and binding it into far-reaching trade networks. That empire did not endure unchallenged. Eventually, internal strife weakened Hukaris, and Khattib moved to seize the southern city-states of the Iron Coast. Though Hukaris lost much, it was never fully conquered, enduring as a diminished but defiant power, until centuries later it was absorbed, like the rest of the region, into the Padishah Empire. Today, this region's forges still produce some of the finest weapons in Kazmarin, and its people remain steeped in a culture that venerates strength, endurance, and war. Authority here rests in the hands of the 3 Forge Kings of Zurakan, grim, cone-crowned rulers who regard themselves less as subjects of Kelesh and more as indispensable allies. They supply soldiers when called, deliver lavish tribute, and keep imperial coffers well filled. In return, they are largely left to govern as they see fit. And they govern brutally. From the walled city of Zurakan, nestled at the foot of Mount Jebel, the Forge Kings rule with iron certainty. From their highland stronghold, the rulers of Hukaris look westwards with unhidden ambition. The Iron Coast, once theirs, remains a constant temptation, its fractious city-states vulnerable to shifting tides of power. And now those tides are turning. Emperor Kalish the 22nd lingers on the brink of death. Queen Shubat commands little affection, and her son Prince Yarl is expected to inherit the throne despite being generally regarded to be of poor character and lacking in wisdom. And as uncertainty grips the court, the Forge Kings are feeling emboldened. Like the lions emblazoned upon their banners, they wait patiently, readying themselves for the right opportunity to make their move. In addition to Zurakan, other important cities in the province include Sirun and High Nirtum. The Iron Coast and the Unbroken League. From the Bull's Head to the shadow of Hanzar's Blade, the Iron Coast has been fought over 4 millennia. In ancient days, its patchwork of petty kingdoms, isolated city-states, and warlord domains formed a contested frontier between the greater powers of Midea, Hukaris, and Khattib. These powers rarely ruled the region directly, however. Instead, they subjugated its smaller polities and turned them against one another, ensuring that no single ruler could gather the strength needed to make the territory a viable power in its own right. The result was a fractured land that was never united. Its rulers held their thrones at the pleasure of distant empires, and any shared identity beyond that imposed by its foreign lords failed to take root. It was the last region to fall under Kelishite control, and when it did, conquest came not from annihilation, but through concession. The Padishah Empire offered terms: political autonomy, protection from imperial armies, and the preservation of local rule. In return, the kingdoms would provide tribute in the form of gold, arms, and conscripts for the empire's vast legions. While the northern stretch of the Iron Coast would eventually unify as the province of Thieron, which I've already discussed, even in the present age, the southern stretch of the Iron Coast remains divided. 12 autonomous holdings make up this territory, and collectively they have come to call themselves the Unbroken League. It is, however, a league in name only. No unity joins these holdings. Each remains fiercely independent, burdened by centuries of rivalry and grievance. Intrigue is the lifeblood of the Iron Coast. Here alliances shift, vendettas endure, and every ruler watches their neighbors as closely as they watch the empire of Kelesh. For generations the League has been contained not by chains but by its own division. The Padishah Empire, meanwhile, has long understood the advantage of this arrangement. For so long as the League remains divided, its members feuding, scheming, and undermining one another, it can never pose a meaningful threat to imperial authority, nor can it have ambitions of true independence. Important powers among the Unbroken League include the following. Close to the border with Thieron lie the plains of Zixos, controlled by the centaur nation of Eudoxos. Its far-ranging centaurs roam from the lands of the northern Minotaurs all the way down to the Arazak River, bound by their own traditions said to be older than any other in the League. South of the plains of Zixos lies Arazak, a city-state steeped in defiance. Its rulers still boast of the ancient emperors they claim to have slain, a legacy of their warlike ambitions worn as both badge and warning. Further south still is the river Damophan, which flows down from the sacred slopes of Mount Yatanu. Along the banks of the river Damophan is the holding of the foremost among the League's powers. Catarchus it is called, and it is the domain of the enigmatic death cult known as the Dark Passage. The cult maintains its hold over the Terminus Gate, an ancient portal leading into the Darklands, believed by its cult members to be a threshold to a literal underworld where souls linger after death. Pilgrims, supplicants, and the desperate come seeking communion with the dead here, though few leave unchanged. And finally, closest to Khattib, in thickly forested Hishaga, the immortal ooze-lord Gelix rules over a domain said to be as alien as its master. Khattib. The last of the Padishah-controlled lands of Kardaji Bay is Khattib. Khattib thrives at the crossroads of wealth and peril. Its prosperity is fueled by vibrant trade with Vudra across the Betul Sea, and by the staggering abundance of resources drawn from its dense primeval jungles. Together, these riches have made Khattib one of the most coveted satrapies in the Padishah Empire's vast holdings. Such wealth does not go unchallenged. Raiders descend from the northern highlands, including bestial humanoids and giants, as well as desperate brigands fleeing the brutal rule of the Forge Kings of Hukaris, while pirates from the Unbroken League and rogue Vudran Mahajnapadas prowl its coasts. Khattib endures in a constant state of guarded opulence, its riches both its strength and its great vulnerability. Across Casmarin, Khattib is renowned for its immense temple cities, sprawling complexes of stone that rise from the verdant canopies of the region's many jungles and rainforests. Each stands as both sanctuary and stronghold, dedicated to a pantheon as vast and varied as the land itself. Khattibi religion bears clear kinship with the faiths of Vudra, blending imported traditions with deeply rooted local worship. Among its most revered figures is Deshto, a hero deity of Khattib's golden age, patron of seafarers and commerce, whose influence still shapes the nation's mercantile identity. And in quieter corners of devotion, the figure of Oathos the Everlost, poisoned, wandering, and eternal, holds a place of somber reverence. Patron of the chronically ill and the dispossessed, Oathos is closely associated with the Susianam people, whose ancestral island now lies in ruin off the southern coast. Their descendants remain a significant part of Khattib's population even to this day. Kelishite faiths have also taken firm root here. The worship of Sarenrae in particular flourishes here, yet Khattib's religious landscape is anything but stable. Over the centuries, gods fall from favor, and when they do, their temple cities are often abandoned to the jungle. Neglected sanctuaries are swallowed whole, their stone halls reclaimed by choking vines and prowling beasts. These lost cities have become places of dread, inhabited by predators, outlaws, and the restless dead. And in some, more ancient guardians linger still. Immortal servitors, abandoned and embittered, who lash out at intruders with divine fury. Not all of Khattib's gods were kind, and not all their servants have forgiven being left behind. Behind the temple cities and the ruins of old, the jungle itself also remains largely unmapped and deeply hostile. Within its trackless depths dwell creatures of nightmare, the face-stealing Kaweno, the steaming amorphous Thaloon, and countless other horrors yet unnamed. These threats rarely breach the sanctified bounds of the cities, though, but for those who venture too far into the forest, they learn all too quickly how untamed this land really is. The people of Khattib reflect the vibrancy of their homeland. Most are small in stature, with dark skin and black hair, which they often partially dye in vibrant colors. While dark eyes are most common, flashes of amber, gray, or green are not unusual. The jungle sustains the people here, offering a wealth of rare substances prized by alchemists and healers. As a result, Khattib has long cultivated traditions of medicine, apothecary craft, and, inevitably, smuggling, each flourishing alongside the other. Many important cities and points of interest can be found in Khattib. Here are some such sites. Heshek is the capital of the nation of Khattib, located on the coast of the Betul Sea. The temple city of Sarsanet, located at the mouth of a major river, is dedicated to the Dawnflower, and it stands among the most influential settlements in the region and as a key center of Sarenrae's worship as well. The ruins at Lost Gaumata in the northwest, and the ruins of Paluvar, on a large island off of Khattib's southern coast, are prominent examples of the many neglected sanctuaries that have fallen to ruin and dread that can be found across Khattib. The inland city of Wathra is a major commercial center located upriver from Azad, a city discussed in more detail in my Vudra Deepdive video, which, despite being on the Khattib side of the Betul Sea, is technically a Vudran holding, forming a part of the western Ghats territory, demonstrating how fuzzy the border is between Vudra and Khattib, here where their territories meet. An updated Iblydos Gazetteer. Now that we've looked at the broader Kardaji Bay region, let's take a closer look at Iblydos, the only realm in the region technically independent of the Padishah Empire. I'm not going to revisit the history, as that has remained largely unchanged, but when I released my original Iblydos video, I had to approximate the map from written text and the existing world map, but since that time Iblydos has been fully mapped out for the Mythspeaker adventure path, and all of the 9 Iblydan polities have now been named and detailed in the source material. Let's take a look at this region and cover it from west to east as we go. Pol Liakora. Pol Liakora, located on Lalisri Island, is the westernmost dominion of Iblydos' independent city-states, serving as a vital gateway between the inner sea and the island nation's storied shores. Despite its wealth and prominence, Pol Liakora has suffered grievously in recent years. At the dawn of the Age of Lost Omens, the whale-like behemoth Uzmaraku rose from the depths and devastated the previous capital city of Liakora, leaving much of it in ruins. In the wake of this disaster, another port city called Eliosos has taken on the role of acting capital. Even so, the people of Pol Liakora refuse to formalize the transition, holding fast to the belief that Uzmaraku can be destroyed and their fallen city reclaimed from the Sidakthi that now infest its drowned remains. More details on Eliosos, including a complete gazetteer, can be found in my previous Iblydos video. Despite the recent hardship, Iliosos and Polyakora's other ports are rarely quiet, welcoming a steady flow of foreign vessels and offering a wide array of services to merchants and weary crews alike. The city's prosperity is built on trade in fruit, pearls, and seafood, with its schools, scholars, and navigators as valued abroad as its maritime bounty. Its religious life reflects this seafaring character, with strong devotion to Gosrae, alongside the local veneration of the hero gods Chalciomedes and Somira. The Verdure. Verdure is a secluded island located somewhere off the coast of Lalisri. It is noteworthy for being the place of operation of a cult called the Womb of the World, traditionally a benevolent group devoted to growth, charity, and the teachings of the reclusive Cyclopean hero god Ludovica. They had historically aided nearby refugees and communities with food and support. In 4722, after a brutal winter, spring's arrival brought many celebrations across Iblydos, including many festivals that in previous years would have been led by the Womb of the World. However, they did not make their customary appearances in Iliosos and elsewhere across Lalisri and Polyakora in the spring. Troubling rumors have surfaced. Under their new leader, Mother Midea, some members have grown withdrawn and secretive, cutting ties with their loved ones. Concerned by these changes, in 4722 a prominent citizen arranged for outside observers to attend Verdure's spring ritual, an invitation Midea accepted. It was extended even to representatives of the mysterious Dark Archive faction of the Pathfinder Society. Poltermeos. Pastoral, hilly, and serene, Poltermeos is a land of scattered wealth and quiet strength. Its population is widely dispersed across small towns and estates, with the city of Tirmeos itself modest by Iblydan standards. This decentralization has long defined the polity's character. Its riches lie not in a single glittering center, but in its rolling countryside and pleasant scattered communities. Such distributed prosperity has also made Poltermeos an enduring target. It shares the island of Tos with its rival Polsilirica, separated more by hills than by distance, and Silirican ambitions have often turned towards Tirmeos' vulnerable holdings. Yet these designs have rarely been realized. Tirmean diplomats have cultivated strong alliances with neighboring city-states, most notably Polyakora and Polzamne, ensuring that any aggression is met with swift, unified reprisal. When diplomacy fails, Tirmeos' famed slingers, among the deadliest in Iblydos, stand ready to defend their homeland. A millennium ago, an unusual addition further enriched the polity. A seafaring band of kobolds arrived and settled among the Tirmeans, earning respect through their exceptional skill in mining and craftsmanship. In return, the kobolds have embraced their adopted homeland with enthusiasm, particularly fascinated by the mythic energies that permeate the archipelago. They claim these forces imbue their eggs with extraordinary properties when incubated here, an assertion many dismiss, but few are willing to test. Finally, the lands of Poltermeos are also renowned for their quarries, which yield fine marbles, diamonds, jadeite, copper, and iron, and vineyards, who produce renowned wines that are exported the world over. Polsilirica. Located primarily on the eastern side of the island of Tos, Polsilirica is renowned as a warlike culture. Known by its own people as Silirica of the Seven Armies, nearby Tirmeos and Lycora have not traditionally looked fondly on Silirica, and when their fierce warriors are safely out of earshot, they sometimes refer to their city-state as Silirica of the Six Failures. Traditionally, the city-state's culture elevates martial prowess above all else, a philosophy reinforced by devotion to the gods Gorum and Moloch, as well as more martial Iblydan hero gods like Somira. Its economy reflects this ethos. Alongside exports of cheese, leather, meat, and wool from its vast pastoral holdings, Polsilirica is equally known for exporting mercenaries, and its warriors are in constant demand across Casmarin, hired by distant powers eager to harness Silirican discipline and ferocity. To support this war engine, Siliricans are experts in weaponcraft, and they have the largest native dwarf population of any territory in Iblydos, and possibly Casmarin at large. Conflict is a near constant state of being for Siliricans. Each generation has seen new wars kindled, though many are little more than ritualized skirmishes, or extended campaigns of raiding, displays of strength meant as much to affirm identity as to secure territory. When peace does take hold, Silirica's soldiers rarely remain idle for long, seeking employment abroad or selling their blades to the highest bidder. Yet for all its outward aggression, Polsilirica is curiously stable at home. Its countryside is among the safest in Iblydos, patrolled by vigilant militias that respond swiftly to any threat. Monsters that stray too close to settlements, or to the great herds of cattle and sheep that blanket the hills, are hunted down without hesitation. Those same herds shape the land in quieter ways. Over time, their passage has worn down the remnants of older ages, trampling ruins into the soil, or exposing what lies buried beneath. As a result, Pol Celerica has become an unexpected haven for archaeologists and adventurers, drawn by the promise of forgotten sites, or of treasures brought to Celerica by its famous raiders of old. Pol Uncore. Pol Uncore occupies the western half of a large island just south of the island of Lalisri. It shares this island with notorious Pol Duraxilis, which occupies the island's eastern half. Although geographically it is positioned just about as strategically as Pol Yakura is, facing the western trade routes with the wealthy inner sea region, Pol Uncore has a much more turbulent history, with waxing and waning cycles of excess, where its fortunes rise in sudden windfalls, and collapse, in which its wealth was squandered in equally dramatic fashion. Throughout its long millennia of history, these periodic occasions of famine and near collapse were then followed by explosive renaissances, during which Uncore exported art, magic items, mercenaries, and ships in astonishing volumes. Each resurgence fueled ambitious construction, with entire districts torn down and rebuilt in pursuit of ever greater splendor. The result is that the capital city is a city layered upon itself. Modern Uncore rises hundreds of feet above the surrounding land, its skyline supported by the buried remains of countless earlier incarnations. Beneath it sprawls a vast and unruly undercity, an accretion of forgotten streets, hollowed foundations, and rediscovered ruins. These depths are only loosely mapped, and largely beyond the reach of any authority, making them a haven for opportunists, criminals, and those who prefer to live unseen. The undercities of Pol Uncore also comprise one of the largest populations of ratfolk, or Isoki, anywhere in the area. Uncore's religious life is as unsettling as its architecture. Alongside the esoteric Cyclops traditions found elsewhere in the Iblydan archipelago, there are other stranger cults as well. One noteworthy one is the secretive Vectatian cult, whose belief is centered not on the reverence of the hero gods of Iblydos, but on their exploitation. To the Vectation, hero gods, as vessels of mythic power, are resources to be cultivated and consumed. Their methods are as calculated as they are disturbing. Promising hero gods are enticed into Uncore with luxury, indulgence, and adoration, allowed to grow fat on food and acclaim. Then, without warning, they are sacrificed, their divine essence ritually harvested and diffused into its cult members. In ages past, when hero gods were more numerous, this cycle may have explained Uncore's frequent patterns of fall, rise, and renewal. Now such figures are rare, but undeterred, the cult has adapted. Bands of so-called god-catchers scour distant lands in search of mythic beings to seize and return to Uncore. Whether these captives arrive willingly or no, it matters little. For the Vectatian cult, divinity is not sacred, it is simply currency. Meanwhile, in recent years, Pol Uncore's ruling council may be at the precipice of another terrible collapse. In the capital city, many of the ruling council were turned to stone in the year 4724. Enough were turned at once to cause the government to be paralyzed with indecision and strife. The culprit behind this incident was a Stheno prophet named Teos, who was born in the forests of Pol Uncore and once enjoyed a peaceful childhood, but whose petrifying gaze was empowered by a warshard of Gorum during the god's reign. This power also attuned Teos to the whispers of the sleeping titan Sangay, and set him on a dark path. Pol Duraxilis. The notorious monster city-state Duraxilis is famed for its more beastly denizens. Once known for exporting timber, pigs, and finely wrought weapons, and for its hero gods, who gained renown slaying fearsome monsters, the city-state's identity was forever altered during a Celerican invasion thousands of years ago. In that desperate hour, the harpy Ekriathe rallied an unlikely host of chimeras, harpies, medusas, and minotaurs, as well as other rarer creatures to defend the island. Their victory forced a reckoning. Duraxilis had not been threatened by monsters, it had been saved by them. In the aftermath, the city-state made a radical choice. Any being willing to abide by its laws would be granted protection under their law. Over the centuries, this policy transformed Duraxilis into one of the most unusual societies in Iblydos. Today, creatures once feared and hunted form the majority of its population, living alongside humans and other ancestries in a tenuous but enduring coexistence. The strong following that the goddess Lamashtu has in Duraxilis reflects this blended identity. So too does the following of the local hero god Iafoli, who resides in the city of Durexilis and is said to be the reincarnation of Ekriathe. Modern Durexilis is as untamed as its people. While it exports bricks, spices, timber, and mercenaries, much of the land beyond the capital has slipped back into wilderness. Old-growth forests reclaim former settlements, now inhabited by creatures who prefer distance from structured society. Law grows thin beyond the city's core, and even within it, order is relative. The capital itself operates less as a unified government and more as a shifting web of influence. District oligarchs, crime lords, and power brokers vie constantly for control, forging alliances and betrayals with equal ease. Yet, when threatened from beyond, these rival factions close ranks with surprising unity. For outsiders, Durexilis is a place of danger and opportunity in equal measure. Its rulers, formal or otherwise, are pragmatic to a fault, employing adventurers, mercenaries, and specialists of all kinds to advance their schemes. And in a city where monsters walk openly and power is contested, there is always work to be found for enterprising visitors. Somewhere, hidden deep within the rugged recesses of Pol Durexilis, is also the cradle of Sangay. Sangay was a titan of artistry, who, like many of their kind, turned on the gods during the Age of Creation. They were defeated by Gorum and Gosre, and though critically wounded, were not destroyed. Instead, they slipped into a coma-like slumber. Sangay's final resting place on Galarian is a bizarre and eerily beautiful sight, where steep, spear-like mountains tower in a circle around a lower plateau in the center. Thunderous waterfalls cascade down the face of this central plateau, pooling in vast lakes below. Itea. Just south of Durexilis is the infamous Chimera Island, and a realm called Itea that is not counted among the 9 recognized city-states of Iblydos. Itea is the domain of Zayaki, the hero god of tides and transformation. Low-lying and treacherous, the island's salt marshes and damp dunes barely rise above the encroaching sea, while its interior is scattered with ancient monuments slowly sinking into silt and brine. The land itself feels impermanent, shaped as much by the tides as by divine whim. Itea's population is as strange as its landscape. A shifting menagerie of chimeric beings dwell here, some native, many transformed. Visitors who offend Zayaki's sensibilities often find themselves remade, their forms twisted into new and often unsettling shapes as punishment for their impertinence. Yet this curse carries a strange protection. Those altered by Zayake fall under her divine care, and the island serves as a sanctuary of sorts for its monstrous inhabitants. This protection is not absolute. Zayake is discerning in her favor, withdrawing it from those who bring undue harm or attempt to exploit the isle as a refuge for unrelated crimes. In such cases, she has permitted outsiders, adventurers, bounty hunters, and the like, to pursue specific quarry within her domain. Those who arrive with respect and restraint may find cooperation, while those who do not rarely leave unchanged. Thieron Island. Visible for miles on a clear day, Thieron is a striking island located between the large islands of Tos and Zaktilos, its silhouette serving as a crucial landmark for mariners navigating the long ocean routes. The island itself is rugged and mountainous, its slopes broken by rocky crevasses and sheer ledges that provide nesting grounds for a wide variety of seabirds. These colonies cling to the stone in dense clusters, their cries carrying far across the water. Dominating the island in its highest peak is the Pinnacle of Winds. This narrow, towering mountain rises sharply into the sky, its upper reaches perpetually obscured by swirling clouds that seem to cling to it by deliberate force rather than natural weather. The phenomenon has long invited speculation and reverence alike. According to legend, the Pinnacle of Winds is not merely a natural formation, but the concealed domain of Aviles of the West, a powerful wind spirit said to dwell beyond the veil of clouds. Whether this is myth or truth, few who gaze upon the peak doubt that some ancient power watches from within that storm. Pol Zamne. Once the foremost of Iblydos' city-states, Pol Zamne occupied a position of natural prominence. Its central location and expansive territory on Zaktilos Island, the largest single island within the Iblydon archipelago, made it the most powerful city-state for generations. Its great economy flowed from a wealth of stone and timber, as well as from the export of finished goods and cultural artifacts like plays and literature. Its culture was deeply rooted in communion with the natural world, informed by a deep connection with the fey creatures of the island, and a special reverence for the court of the eldest. Fauns and leshies are particularly abundant on the island, shaping a society that blurred the boundary between civilization and wilderness. That balance, however, collapsed over the last 2 centuries, as a cascade of disasters have unraveled much of Polzamne's historical power. The troubles began in earnest in 4524, when the Zamnian hero god Basile attempted a legendary feat, rescuing her slain husband Paneamon from the underworld. She succeeded in breaching the plains, stealing back his spirit, and returning to the mortal world, an act that should have secured her eternal glory. However, this event would lead to catastrophe. In piercing so deeply through the island's bedrock, Basile inadvertently broke open an ancient subterranean prison that had long contained Bailax, an imprisoned conspirator dragon from Polzamne's distant past. Upon escaping, the dragon followed Basile back to the capital city of Zamne. Bailax launched a campaign against the city's hero gods, seeking dominance over them. Though the weakened pantheon ultimately drove him away, the damage was severe. Both Basile and Paneamon were destroyed, and the foundations of Polzamne's divine order were irreparably shaken. It should also be noted that a different version of the same story is also described elsewhere in the source material. In this version, the hero god is male and named Basilios, and he enters the underworld to save his wife Anaemi, but the rest of the story is unchanged. Regardless, these events culminated in the deaths of multiple hero gods, and bitter internal conflicts that followed left the state fractured and leaderless. Many of its great settlements now stand in ruin, their inhabitants scattered or fled, their once vibrant communities reduced to hollow remnants. In the absence of stewardship, nature has surged back with relentless force. Orchards run wild, palaces crumble beneath creeping roots, and entire districts have been swallowed by dense overgrowth. Much of Zaktilos has become feral, a place where the old world lingers only in fragments beneath the green. This transformation has not gone unnoticed. Creatures from Pol Duraxilis seeking territories free from constraint have begun to claim portions of the island. One notable example is the Sphinx Neshkefru, who inhabits some of the significant ruins of the old city of Zamne. All the while, adventurers and treasure hunters also arrive in growing numbers, drawn by the promise of lost wealth and forgotten knowledge. While Polzamne is tragically still in the process of coming undone, its past still lingers in song and history, but whether any of its ancient glory can still be reclaimed is another matter entirely. The Satyr Shoals. South of Zaktilos Island and east of Duraxilis lie the Satyr Shoals. Formed by relentless upwelling currents from the Obari Ocean, these islands are a shifting expanse of sand and seashells. Narrow straits choked with sediment give way to blinding dunes of pale limestone that shimmer under the sun, broken only by scattered stretches of firmer ground. Nothing here stays buried for long. Structures here are swallowed by drifting sands, only to be revealed again years later, half ruined and ripe for scavenging. Unclaimed and unwanted by neighboring city-states, the shoals have become a haven for those who prefer life beyond the reach of authority. Pirates, smugglers, revelers, and outcasts carve out a precarious existence amid the shifting terrain, building temporary settlements that may vanish with the next great drift. From time to time, nearby city-states launch raids against the shoals, ostensibly to curb piracy and restore order. These expeditions serve as much for appearances as for results, reassuring trade interests along routes like the Obari Crossing. In truth, they achieve little in terms of lasting change. A few pirate enclaves are scattered, a handful of camps destroyed, and for a brief span the seas grow quieter. The most famous of its permanent inhabitants are the satyr clans for which the shoals are named, roaming bands who host endless intoxicating revels. Their wandering celebrations are as dangerous as they are alluring, drawing in unwary travelers who may find themselves lost to the festivities for days, months, or years. Hektin. Just off the coast of the far western reaches of the satrapy of Midea is a cluster of islands, the most famous of which is a small island of Hektin, defined by its strange and treacherous waters. Despite their proximity to the Medean coast, these islands are considered formally a part of the Iblydon archipelago and not a part of Midea. On the island of Hektin, a subterranean aquifer surfaces in 3 natural springs, each releasing aromatic, mineral-rich water. Yet the springs carry a subtle peril. Prolonged exposure dulls perception, erodes memory, and distorts the passage of time. Some visitors linger too long and simply forget to leave, their lives slipping away in quiet dissolution as days blur into nothing. Year-round habitation belongs almost exclusively to the cult of Lysianassa, Empress of the Torrent. These secluded disciples revere a peculiar aspect of the elemental lord, shaping their worship around the manipulation of memory and of forgetting. They harvest the island's waters into carefully prepared teas and cordials, each formula calibrated to induce precise effects, soothing the pain of a specific trauma, blunting emotional resonance, or erasing entire stretches of personal history. Every transaction here comes at a price, always negotiated in advance, and always enforceable within 3 years. Visitors who fail to settle their debts experience grave consequences. Some collapse into catatonia, overwhelmed by the sudden return of suppressed memories, while others are found drowned in the island's streams, as though drawn back into the waters they once consumed. Pol Reinforos. Located on the island of Nenakari, situated on the northeast of the large central island of Zaktilos, Pol Reinforos occupies a precariously abundant land, where fertility and destruction are inseparably bound. Centaur populations range across much of the island of Nenakari, drawn to its volcanic northern coast where jagged peaks intercept the sea's moisture-laden winds. These mountains serve to wring rain from passing clouds and feed a network of mineral-rich permanent rivers, waters that in turn flood the lowland valleys with rich deposits of ash and silt. The result is an unexpected bounty. Pol Reinforos serves as the breadbasket of Iblydos, producing cloth, grain, honey, and pottery in remarkable quantity. Yet the land is never still. Volcanic activity and frequent earthquakes make permanence impossible. Buildings collapse as often as they are raised, and entire communities have adapted to a semi-nomadic existence, carrying their homes, shrines, and livelihoods with them as they move across the shifting terrain. Even the temples of hero gods are designed for impermanence, mounted on wagons or constructed in modular forms small enough to be transported when the ground inevitably fails them. Centaur communities remain central to this adaptive way of life, their mobility and resilience well suited to Nenakari's instability. Amid this restless landscape lies the city of Reinforos itself, the closest thing to a fixed settlement anywhere on the island. Its structures rise on stilts above the Siestin River, built to withstand the floods and accompanying eruptions from Mount Iblydos. Even here, however, stability is relative. The city survives not by resisting the island's volatility, but by accommodating it. They are perpetually rebuilding in anticipation of the next upheaval. An important figure in the lore from Reinforos is Kinostes, the Fallen Blade, an Iblidan hero god of tragedy and sacrifice, who famously was turned into a vampire. A significant temple dedicated to Kinostes was once located on the smaller island of Pakilikos, off the coast of Nenakari, but it was cursed and sank beneath the waves. Despite all this tragedy, the Fallen Blade is actually a surviving hero god, who continues to stalk Reinforos as both a predator and also as a defender, an arrangement the city's population have broadly come to accept. Pol Hoimpeia. While Pol Yakora is Iblydos' most significant western-facing polity, Pol Hoimpeia is its most significant eastern one. It stands as Iblydos' principal gateway to Vudra, a maritime crossroads where westbound ships pause to resupply before braving the more perilous routes beyond. In practice, Hoimpeia functions as both a waypoint and a cultural ambassador of sorts, filtering Vudran influence into the wider inner sea. Despite its strategic importance, Pol Hoimpeia is not a land of agricultural abundance. Its soils are poor and unyielding, producing little of sustenance or value, so the city-state has turned necessity into identity. Its industrious populace excels in labor-intensive crafts, alchemy, fine clothing, olive oil, perfume, intricate pottery, goods that travel far beyond the archipelago and often define Iblidan refinement in foreign markets. In ambition and aesthetic, Pol Hoimpeia has long styled itself as a trendsetter, shaping art and fashion across the region. Religiously, the city-state is deeply influenced by the heroes and deities of Vudra, whose traditions mingle freely with local practices. Temples and shrines reflect this syncretism, reinforcing Hoimpeia's identity as a place of exchange, not just of goods, but of ideas, faiths, and stories. Pol Hoimpeia is also famed for its cultural influence. Its thriving entertainment districts draw a constant influx of fauns, satyrs, and other fae. These visitors move between settlements like living sparks, bringing chaos, indulgence, and occasional destruction in their wake. In Pol Hoimpeia, commerce and chaos often travel together, and both are welcomed, so long as they create something worth exporting. Chosdos Isle. Directly south of Hoimpeia lies the treacherous Chosdos Isle. This island's many dangerous monsters and treacherous waters make it a place only the foolish mariner would stop at. In fact, it is because of the dangerous nature of Chosdos Island that Pol Hoempeia has become a wealthy and much-trafficked Iblidan polity, as it is much closer to the Iblidan interior than a merchant vessel traveling from Vudra to the inner sea would probably prefer. Yet the dangerous island effectively funnels merchant traffic into Hoempeia as the first eastern port of call. The Cowries. Located off the northeastern coast of the island of Koshith, and named for the way their jagged silhouettes echo the ridged form of a cowrie shell, the Cowries are uninhabited islands that serve as famous neutral grounds for regional disputes. Here, conflicts of every scale are settled, from military engagements to furious ideological debates, with opposing sides each occupying separate islets and conducting hostilities across open water. The narrow bay between them has become a graveyard of ambition. Its currents are choked with the remnants of countless confrontations, shipwrecks layered upon shipwrecks, the bones of fallen heroes, and the skeletal remains of colossal leviathans drawn into ancient battles. And within these submerged ruins, dangers thrive as readily as the relics that could be plundered there. Pol Bailax. Finally, the last polity in the region is Pol Bailax, that has long held dominion over the island of Koshith, a natural crossroads where Iblidan and Kardaji Bay cultures meet and mingle. Its position near the Padishah realms of Midea and Thieron has made it less dependent on Obari trade than many of its peers, choosing instead to orient its culture and commerce closer to its Padishah neighbors. From its ports flow exports of books, copper, dyes, spices, and wine, goods that reflect both its scholarly traditions and its cultivated refinement. Pol Bailax is governed as a noocracy, a state formerly ruled by the wise. At its apex sits the Philosopher Council, a rotating body of 25 learned citizens who serve staggered 5-year terms, with 5 members replaced each year through competitive selection. Candidates undergo rigorous evaluation, including logic exams, esoteric debate, and extensive written philosophical discourse, all scrutinized by the city's many intellectual and civic constituencies. One notable current council member is Councillor Terpsame, a retired duelist. Operating at a level beneath the Philosopher Council are a few other bodies, including the Drassicons, who serve as local department or service heads, the Assembly of the 400, which serves as the legislature, the local hero gods, who have an informal role in polity governance, and a few key advisory figures, such as Tribune Kotos, the centaur liaison to the Philosopher Council, who represents centaur interests in the polity, the Cyclops Mythspeaker Scorgamos, leader of the Cyclopean Seers, and Pyre Keeper Simene, a centaur priest and a conservator of sacred fires, as well as a speaker for the Bailaxian pantheon. Pol Bailax's cultural identity is strongly tied to its most famous hero god, Piratharos, of pottery and pyres, who forged a lasting bond with the phoenix Salquin. Upon Piratharos' death, Salquin immolated herself in a ritual act of renewal, later returning every 137 years to scatter her life-giving ash across Koshith and restoring its poor soil. This cycle became central to Bailax's prosperity and mythic identity. Over time, Bailax's mainland colonies gained independence. However, in 4724, the expected year of the Phoenix's return, Salquin did not appear. At the beginning of the second edition Mythspeaker adventure path, which is set in the year 4725, Pol Bailax faces an uncertain future, with Salquin's return over a year overdue. Its people are torn between hope and fear that their sacred cycle of renewal may have failed. The city of Bailax serves as a key location in that adventure path, so let's take a closer look at the city of Pyres. Bailax, the city of Pyres. Bailax is divided into 6 distinct districts, each shaped by its own geography, history, and the city's evolving cultural identity. Together they form a layered urban landscape where sacred tradition, commerce, and industry all coexist in constant negotiation. The North Slope. A relatively subdued district, the North Slope is primarily residential, shaped in part by the Acropolis's long shadow, which darkens portions of the district each day. Its character is practical and lived in, composed of apartment blocks, modest storefronts, and small parks woven between tightly packed streets. The Kylix. Sprawling outwards in a broad, shallow basin, the Kylix contrasts sharply with the heights of the Acropolis. True to its namesake vessel, this district gathers the everyday life of the city into a wide communal bowl of markets, workshops, parks, and affordable housing. It is also the cultural heart of Bailax's centaur population, who play a central role in constructing and maintaining the district's communal dwellings and vast shared storehouses. The Kylix thrives on movement, exchange, and collective labor. One significant local point of interest in western Kylix district is a shop called the Thunderstep Spices that was founded nearly 3 centuries ago by Braga Thunderstep, a centaur merchant whose audacious maneuvering shaped Bailax's spice trade. By cornering key markets and redirecting supply chains, he established a refinery that still bears his name. Now run by his descendants and extended clan, the business specializes in dried herbs and complex regional blends, with particular renown for mixtures incorporating Zoffa. Though highly successful, Thunderstep Spices remains entangled in a web of rivalries born from Braga's original schemes. Competitors and enemies continue to clash with the company through sabotage, corporate espionage, and hired disruption, conflicts that the Thunderstep clan is equally eager to return in kind. Also in this district, but located closer to the south slope and the docks, is the Blood Plaza. Originally a practical civic space, Blood Plaza was once used for the processing of amaranth during harvest seasons. Its flagstones became permanently stained over centuries of threshing, creating a deep red coloration that gradually spread across the surface. The name Blood Plaza emerged later, born of local humor at the way rainwater would wash pigment into the nearby drainage channels, producing unsettling runoff that alarmed less familiar visitors. Despite its ominous name, the plaza has never been the site of violence of any significance. Its reputation is purely historic and aesthetic in nature. The Acropolis. Rising from the island's basalt spine, the Acropolis forms the ceremonial and spiritual heart of Bailax. Its craggy elevation is crowned with monumental temples, ancient palaces, and cyclopean dwellings that cluster around the central plaza, where the phoenix Salquin is typically destined to self-immolate upon each return. This is the city's most sacred ground, where divine cycles intersect with civic life. Here, myth is not merely remembered, it is awaited. Within the Acropolis on the north side is the 9-step aviary. Set around a distinctive step ziggurat, this park serves as both sanctuary and nesting ground for Bailax's iconic pyrefowl. By ancient law, the pyrefowl are strictly protected. Harassment or harm against them is forbidden, with only designated wardens permitted to manage the population and maintain the grounds. In exchange, these wardens are allowed to collect and sell their shed feathers, which remain a highly prized commodity in the world of high fashion. Despite their protected status, pyrefowl are far from harmless. Their fascination with shiny objects often leads flocks to shadow well-adorned passers-by, hoping to steal or dislodge jewelry for their nests. During breeding seasons, some citizens avoid ornamentation altogether, as males have been known to aggressively harvest jewelry directly from unwary targets. The birds are also fiercely territorial and will readily kill small animals that encroach too closely. Meanwhile, on the south side of the Acropolis is the Kalian Field, which traces its origin to Kali, a hero god of scouting and athletics. During the festival held in her honor following her apotheosis, she threw a javelin so far that it left the stadium entirely. Bailax, interpreting the event as a divine sanction, established a sports field at the impact site and declared it sacred. Over time, the surrounding grounds evolved into a sprawling recreational complex. Yet the original javelin remains embedded where it landed, immovable, unweathered, and untouched by time. Attempts to remove it have become a rite of passage for generations of Bailaxian youth, each effort accompanied by legends promising fame and athletic greatness to whoever succeeds. None have. Eventually, a flagstone plaza and sundial were constructed to surround the artifact, using its shadow to mark the passage of time. The South Slope. Bathed in sunlight and overlooking the sea, the South Slope is Bailax's most prestigious district. Its sweeping views and favorable lights have made it the favored home of the city's elite, and its streets are lined with high-end shops, theaters, and museums, as well as restaurants and major civic institutions. South Slope is where culture and governance converge, and where the city most visibly performs its identity to itself and to the world. Coppice Heights. Marking the southeastern border of the city, Coppice Heights curves like the hooked blade of its namesake weapon. Though less affluent than districts closer to the Acropolis, it serves as a vital working-class hub, particularly for artisans tied to the spur's industrial trades. Beyond its workshops and modest residences, Coppice Heights is defined by its dense network of shrines. Nearly every street hosts a small sanctuary dedicated to a hero god, past or present. Even after a deity's passing, custodians maintain these sites, keeping their sacred fires perpetually lit in acts of enduring reverence. The Spur. Extending as a narrow peninsula that shelters the northern harbor, the Spur is both lifeline and working frontier. Its constant sea breeze helps disperse the odors of its most intensive industries, tanning, smelting, and fish processing, though shifts in wind occasionally remind the rest of the city of its presence. As it is a little geologically unstable, and composed largely of compacted sand over a rocky base, the spur is in a constant state of subtle change, eroding and reforming over time. This instability, combined with its industrial importance, has limited large-scale development, leaving it a rugged and utilitarian counterweight to the refinement of South Slope. Copper Row winds along the spur, forming the heart of Bailax's metalworking district. Long renowned for its production of copper and bronze, the street's workshops create finely crafted goods such as helmets, ceremonial braziers, and intricate jewelry sought by merchants across the Obari Passage. In recent years, other traders have moved into the area as well, filling former workshops with fishmongers, garum brewers, and other ancillary industries. This shift has had unintended ecological consequences. Generations of waste dumped offshore have altered local waters, attracting reef predators and giving rise to clusters of globsters, semi-sentient masses that feed on organic refuse and stray marine life. These have become a general nuisance in the area for some time. The Hero Gods of Iblydos, a comprehensive guide. In this final section, we take a deeper look at the hero gods of Iblydos, figures both ancient and ascendant, whose myths continue to shape the archipelago. What follows are some of the most prominent surviving hero gods, and the legends that define them. Erekostes, the mentor in blades. Areas of concern, contingencies, and intelligent items. When the behemoth Uzmaraku ravaged western Iblydos, the hero god Zimakter led a band of mythic warriors to stop it. The beast devoured him whole, hurling his curved blade into a nearby shoal. Within days of its recovery, the weapon awakened, imbued with intelligence and mythic power. Recognized as a new kind of hero god in its own right, the blade was enshrined in a temple armory and named Erekostes. Whether it houses Zimakter's soul or something entirely new remains unknown. Unlike most divinities, Erekostes does not merely grant power, it lends power to its wielder. The blade occasionally joins worthy heroes on their quests, though it is famously fickle, sometimes vanishing for weeks or years when things go poorly. Kinostes, the fallen blade. Areas of concern, tragedy, and sacrifice. Once a humble saddle maker, Kinostes rose to prominence, defending Polre and Foros during a Silurican raid. Armed with little more than a tack knife, he slew the enemy leader, igniting his mythic transformation. He remained a vigilant defender of his realm even after ascending, but his story took a dark turn when he encountered a vampire who turned him into one of his own. Now an undead hero god, Kinostes continues to defend his city, though at a cost. Citizens occasionally vanish, later found drained of blood. His followers are now divided. The Night Wardens embrace his monstrous nature as a necessary evil, while the Redeemers seek to end his existence, believing death to be his only salvation. Strangely, Kinostes empowers both sects, suggesting he accepts either fate. Drocalion, the Pride Father. Areas of concern, lions. Drocalion defies nearly every expectation of a hero god. He has no doctrine, no mythic origin story, and no real awareness of his own divinity. He is quite simply a divine lion. And yet, despite his animal nature, he does grant magic power. His followers revere his unthinking purity, living by the straightforward, brutal logic he embodies. They hunt near his territory, celebrating the raw simplicity of survival. Those who earn his attention consider it a blessing, though these stories admittedly sometimes end with a lion devouring his own faithful. Iapholi, Child of the Bloodstone. Areas of concern, heritage, and acceptance. Long ago, the harpy Ekriathe sought to protect monster kind in Pol Direxilis from the rising tide of hero gods who hunted them. Through cunning and prophecy, she ascended to mythic power and became a fierce avenger of her kin. Upon her death, she commanded her followers to consume her body, ensuring her eventual rebirth. Her cult, the Ecrian Revival, has since named several successors, and in 4702 they proclaimed the infant Iapholi as Ekriathe reborn, identifying her as a being of immense mythic potential. Raised in the cosmopolitan city of Direxilis, Iapholi promotes coexistence between monsters and mortals. Under her influence, many beasts have grown more thoughtful and restrained. Yet not all agree with her approach. Some in her cult would like to see her herald an age of monstrous conquest, while others outside her cult have opposed her or sought her death, fearing her ascension will lead to a new unification of monster kind. Calxiomedes, the Green Warden. Areas of concern: gardens, orchards, and terraces. Calxiomedes is not covered here, but is discussed in more detail in my original Iblydos video. Ludovica, areas of concern: the spring and festivals. A reclusive cyclopean hero god tied to the island of Verdure, Ludovica inspired the once benevolent Womb of the World. In recent years, though, her withdrawal and the cult's troubling transformation have cast doubts over her legacy. Ongalte, the death of divinity. Areas of concern: deicide. In the early days, Cyclopes and humans stood as equals. Over time, however, humanity eclipsed its giant allies. Ongalte, a Cyclops trained in myth-speaking, grew resentful of her people's decline. To change fate, she enacted her own myth-speaking, collapsing a temple upon herself only to rise moments later as a hero god. Since then, she has dedicated herself to a singular purpose: the destruction of other hero gods. Ongalte has slain many other hero gods now, relying on manipulation and disgrace to draw others from hiding. Ironically, she once elevated a champion of her own, Iblydos, whose eventual betrayal only confirmed her belief that all hero gods must die. Pharimia, the Horizon Flame. Areas of concern: light, guidance, and infrastructure. Pharimia is a paradox, a goddess of clarity with an uncertain origin. For generations she has wandered Iblydos, constructing lighthouses, ports, and signal fires, asking only that they be maintained and respected. In an age where myth-speaking falters and the pantheon dwindles, her work has become vital. Pharimia now acts as a stabilizing force among the hero gods, mediating between rival factions and uniting unlikely allies against common cause. Her clergy follow suit, serving as diplomats and leaders in fragile coalitions. Sumaira, the Divine General. Areas of concern: seasons and spears. Sumaira is not covered here, as she is also discussed in more detail in my original Iblydos video. Upaion and Warwick, the Shield Brothers. Areas of concern: shield bearers, promises. When offered mythic ascension, Upaion refused, unwilling to outlive his beloved Warwick. Instead, the two chose to remain soldiers, seeking meaning together rather than immortality alone. They fell side by side at the Battle of Tessikon Heights, only to rise together as a single hero god. Their power is inseparable, their divinity shared. They grant blessings only when united, embodying loyalty, partnership, and bonds forged in battle. Iblydos, the Tide Fang. Areas of concern: reefs and shipwrecks. Created by Ongalte as a weapon against other hero gods, Iblydos was meant to be her loyal agent at sea. Instead, he proved as treacherous as the waters he rules. A pirate at heart, Iblydos delights in chaos and contradiction. He urges his followers to plunder shipwrecks, then punishes them if they are too greedy. Sailors often cast offerings into the sea to appease him, hoping to avoid his wrath. Those who fail find their ships dragged onto reefs, their hulls torn open, and their cargoes lost to the depths. Zayaki, the Matron of Metamorphoses. Areas of concern: tides and transformation. Once a sea hag of unknown ambition, Zayaki bargained her way into divinity through a mysterious pact with the Cyclopes of Hoempeia. Now a hero god, she rules the realm of Itia on Chimera Island, where she trades in secrets, transformations, and dangerous magic. Her appearance shifts like the tides, and she offers similar mutability to those who seek her aid, particularly the dysmorphic or self-altering. Despite her sinister reputation, Zayaki is often a fair and civil host, but those who insult or deceive her face terrible consequences, often being transformed into beasts doomed to wander her domain. Hero gods of the past. Gone but not forgotten, these hero gods survive only in legend and memory. Eliake. Among the first mortals to ascend through Cyclopean myth-speaking, Eliake earned renown by slaying the immortal Hydra Sagacis. She founded the city of Eliosos on the battlefield, fulfilling her prophecy through conquest and creation. Amphila. A dwarf prophetess of Paul Hoempeia, Amphila was among those deceived into defiling her own temple. She narrowly escaped the sealing miasma, leaving behind a legacy marked by both foresight and tragedy. Basile. Renowned for plundering the underworld to reclaim her husband, Basile's triumph proved catastrophic. Her passage shattered an ancient prison, unleashing the dragon Canvinilax and dooming Polzamne. Diaphoria, twin pioneer of the myth-speaking apotheosis with her sister Eliake, Diaphoria founded and ruled Liakora, while her sister tamed the wilds. Her legacy endures in the political and cultural foundations of Pol Liakora. Ayapenea, a hero god of monuments and immortality, Ayapenea sought to defy death through ever greater rituals, ultimately embracing undeath. Her fall from revered healer to doomed monster became a lasting cautionary tale. Gailenos, a gnome patron of music, Gailenos infused mythic power into song, and even soothed a rampaging dragon into friendship. His legacy endures through his school and the harmony he forged between mortal and beast. Hermia the Wayfarer, the last known wielder of Erakostes, Hermia sought to lift the cursed island of Pakilikos with an enchanted lyre. She never returned, and her fate remains an unsolved mystery. Kylie, a hero god of scouting and athletics, Kylie's legendary javelin throw reshaped Bailax. The sacred Kylian field marks where her feat was taken as a sign of divine favor. Karskios, a minotaur hero god of fiend hunting and imprisonment, Karskios led a relentless crusade against evil. His followers continue their grim work long after his death. Loptolian, ferryman of the dead, Loptolian guided spirits across the sea in glowing processions. Though long gone, the recent dead of Polre and Foros are said to still walk to the shore each moon day, as if answering his call. Makos, patron of drunkards and brawling, Makos wandered from tavern to tavern, leaving chaos in his wake. His legend endures both a warning and a mystery, as no one can confirm his death. Metakor, a Bailaxian hero god of dowsing and bronze casting, Metakor was revered by miners and merchants. His influence lingers in the island's enduring trade in copper and crafted goods. Frescories, a schemer among hero gods, Frescories destroyed his rival Sofreista. By turning her own rivals against her, he proved cunning, good rival, raw power. Pirtharos. For centuries, Pirtharos presided over pyres and pottery, uniting craft and ritual. His steady influence shaped the city-state of Pol Bailax, setting a legacy for culture, funerary rites, and artisan traditions. Tyreme. A legendary monster slayer, Tyreme defeated the venomous shoal render through patience and precision. His victory fed Bailax for days and cemented his reputation for cunning heroism. Sofreista, an ancient hero god famed for slaying the chimera of Avalos, Sofreista was once widely revered. Her downfall, brought about through betrayal, remains one of Iblydos' great tragedies. Spalkis, a shadowy hero god of skirmishers and sheep-stealing, Spalkis was best known for a long rivalry with Somaira. Unlike many of his kind, he met an unremarkable end, dying of old age. Siskimne, a mistress of serpents and secrets, Siskimne delivered cryptic prophecies through ophiomancy. Her writings continue to inspire mystery cults and dangerous rituals. Takibiados, an undefeated wrestler and Iruxi hero god, Takibiados achieved legend through sheer strength and endurance. She escaped a grim sacrificial fate at the hands of the god-catchers of Polungore, though her past shadowed her ever after. Tarnalon the Lucky. In desperation, Tarnalon turned to blood sacrifice to save Polzamne, briefly mastering the seas. His hubris, however, provoked divine wrath, hastening the city's destruction, and according to some rumors, even being the cause that raised Uzmaraku from the depths. Themphis. A manipulator of grudges and rivalries, Themphis offered patronage only to incite conflict. Her schemes fractured city-states, leaving scars that endured long after her passing. Thonis of the 30 Columns. A hero god of commerce, Thonis rejected temples in favor of marketplaces as his sacred domain. His legacy lives on in Eliosos's flood market, though his ultimate fate actually remains unknown. Uldnir, a master of gems and ambition, Uldnir sought to tame a deadly island with enchanted air. His plan ended in disaster when collapsing caverns buried both him and his dream. Untoya, patron of beekeeping and brewing, Untoya pioneered mead-making and sustainable apiary practices. Her teachings shaped both agriculture and settlement across Iblydos. Vastilinos, a battlefield strategist, Vastilinos led Poliakora to victory at the Battle of Lovridiemos through cunning use of terrain. His legacy endures as a hero god of noted tactical brilliance. Zimacter, The first wielder of Erekostes Zimector fell to the behemoth Uzmaraku. Some believe his soul still lives on in the blade, while others claim that he lives yet within the monster that devoured him. Zdokhaire, slain battling the behemoth Uzmaraku, Zdokhaire's story did not end with death. A vision of his purified soul later returned with a dire prophecy. Zdokhaire is discussed in more detail in my previous Iblydos video. Zemesticles, a figure of myth more than history, Zemesticles is said to have battled a great serpent, giving rise to the first Hydra. Whether truth or legend, his tale echoes through Iblydan storytelling. Other gods of Kardaji Bay. In addition to the hero gods that the region is famous for, there are full-fledged divinities that are worshipped uniquely here in this part of the Pathfinder world. These deities include Anras, Mother Sky. Anras is the wife of Umarik, also called Father Storm, and she and her husband are the two principal deities of the old pantheon of the Kala people, the original people of the land of Hukaris. Anras's areas of concern are astronomy, foresight, and the weather, and she encourages her followers to seek new discoveries, to practice astrological divination, and to protect people from storms and the natural elements. She prepares people to endure bad weather, but does not approve of those that curse it when it comes. She also has a poor opinion of those who try to trick their way out of their preordained fate or destiny. The brother bulls, Belek and Cormian. These are actually two fraternal gods, central to the Minotaur faiths of Thieron. Belek is also known as Brother Bold, and he encourages his followers to participate in feats of strength, to inspire courage in the meek, and to proclaim one's prowess loudly and proudly. Cormian is also known as Brother Guile, and he encourages his followers to seek clever solutions to problems, to solve mazes and puzzles, and even to participate in pranks. They are often worshipped together, with Belek viewed as a tough but cunning god, and Cormian viewed as a cunning but tough god. Deshto, the Merchant Maiden. This Khattibi commerce goddess rivals Abadar in this region for dominance over the faiths of the many merchants and tradesfolk of the land. She is viewed in Khattib in particular as being a key figure in their cultural identity and as a source of their great wealth and power. She instructs her followers to sail to distant lands to establish new trade routes and to trade freely and openly. Itaris, the bride of Idursius. The trickster bride of Idursius, who used deception to bring wealth and divine secrets to the ancient Ashmayar Empire, has recently been resurrected in Mishyria, brought back by the god's reign. She instructs her followers to tend to the needs of the weak and to band in great numbers to overwhelm the enemy. But there is a double edge to many of her edicts, with those who understand her deeper mysteries recognizing that these two edicts also serve to accumulate your own strength and personal power. She has also shared edicts particular to her resurrection in the modern age, such as to reclaim the past glory of the old Ashmayar civilization, and to study the great mysteries of the ancient past and to learn from them. Oathos the Everlost. The Susianam deity Oathos, also discussed in my Kadira region Deepdive, who encourages his followers to cure diseases and offer comfort to the downtrodden, remains a prominent deity in the realm of Khattib. Umarik, Father Storm. The husband of Anras is the patriarch deity of the Kala pantheon. He has a few aspects, one of which is paternal in nature, encouraging followers to support their families and close friends, and another which is tied to his nature as a storm god. Here he advises followers to walk out into the rain, unless they are availing health, and even to seek out places where lightning is struck. Felena and Moloch. Felena is an Archon Imperial Lord of Heaven, and Moloch is an Archdevil of Hell, and they are both discussed in much more detail in my Archon's Religion Guide and in my Devil's Religion Guide. Both are regionally important demigods, particularly in Mishyria, where their faiths are at war with each other. It appears Felena's followers currently have an alliance with the cult of Itaris. All three faiths have started to push out the traditionally widespread faith of Sarenrae in the region, causing a good deal of local religious friction.